Glory to you, O Lord.
Jesus said, "You are the salt of the earth. But if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything, but is thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hid. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under the bushel basket, but on the lampstand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish, but to fulfill. Very truly I tell you, until heaven and earth pass away, not one letter, not one stroke of a letter will pass from the law until all is accomplished. Therefore, whoever breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and the Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven." This is the gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
Please be seated. This is an interesting teaching. Does anyone know what this teaching is part of?
Give us a hint.
Beatitudes, thank you very much. This is part of the Sermon on the Mount. Now, when I say Sermon on the Mount, what image comes up to you? Being up someplace high? With people around? I know that in movies they've portrayed Jesus going up to a certain height, just high enough where all of the people who were gathered, all these crowds, would be able to hear him. And in the crowds, there were the poorest of the poor and the richest of the rich. There were soldiers, there were diplomats, there were politicians, there were some scribes and Pharisees, there were some good guys and bad guys. There were all kinds of people around. Now let's see exactly what Scripture tells us about this. Chapter 5 in Matthew, which is what we're reading from, says, "When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up the mountain, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him. Then he began to speak, and he taught them." Is that a different picture? It sounds to me almost like Jesus saw the crowds because they've been following him, because he's been healing and he's been feeding, and these people just want more. And so he goes up, and then his disciples come. And they sit down and he teaches the disciples. Kind of a different look here, isn't it? That Jesus is actually using this as a teaching moment, and if we look through the Old Testament and even the New Testament, we find out that a lot of amazing things, a lot of teaching actually happens on the mountain. Moses, of course, went up the mountain by himself, and he came down with the Ten Commandments. Abraham, of course, went up on the mountain with his son, and of course, God spoke to him there as well. We know that even Jesus goes up on the mountain with 3 of his disciples when he is transfigured. And there Elijah and Moses appear as well. Not a lot of great crowds there. They're all waiting down below. So Jesus is teaching his disciples, and that's very important for us to understand. He is teaching the people who are following him. He is teaching the people who want to learn from him. He is teaching the people who will be imitators of him. He is teaching his disciples. He's teaching you and I. He is teaching them that they are to be light and they are to be salt. Not something we think about a whole lot today. And if I was to ask you, how are you light in the world and how are you salt for the world? We might come up with a lot of different ways. And then I wonder how it is when we go out into the world. How do people truly see us? Are we a light for others? Well, I'm out in the world a whole lot. I tend to go out undercover. I don't wear my clerical outfit most places. I go and be with people, especially those who are in very difficult circumstances. I get to be with people that I might see in my neighborhood. I get to be with people maybe out somewhere having a beer or having coffee. I get to be with everyday people. And yet they seem to know what I do. And the conversation will always come around to God. And that's a great thing. But the problem is, a lot of people tell me their stories about how they've turned away from God, how they've turned away from the church. And it's not so much because of God, rather it's because of the church. And sometimes they paint a broad stroke because, let's face it, the church has gotten some bad press, and rightly so. And when I talk about the church, I talk about all of the denominations that believe in Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. And if you group them all together, man, I'll tell you what, from the outside looking in, they suck. We have got people in power, people who have been called to be shepherds of God's people, who have abused their authority. They have preyed upon innocent people, children and women and men. They have taken and extorted money. They have done so much wrong. And not only that, but there have been people in the church, and you and I have probably come across some of those folks who, well, on Sunday mornings they look really good. But then comes Monday, and it's like they're a whole different person. You see, their Monday through Saturday personality doesn't quite measure up with their Sunday persona. I've heard people tell me that they would love to follow Jesus. It's just the rest of the people there that cause them all the heartache. And sometimes we ourselves are guilty of that. Sometimes we're just not at our best. Let's face it. We're sinners. Each and every one of us. You see, when I talk with folks like that, I do indeed let them know that, yes, as a church, we have failed. I have failed. And I am sorry. You see, I've always felt that honesty is the best way to deal with folks. To admit our faults, and we have many. But then I also tell them I would like them to be honest as well. And I would like them to allow me not to explain as far as to find excuse, but rather to help them understand one important thing. That the church in which I belong, we have to think of it not of a place where there's a bunch of holy people, but I want you to picture it more like walking into an ER in a hospital. That there's a lot of sick people there. There's a lot of people who are broken. There's a lot of people who are hurting. There's a lot of people who have so much wrong with them that the only place they know where to go is into the emergency room. And in every ER I've ever been to, they are short-staffed. And they've got people who want to help and are trying to do the best that they can, and they fall short because they just don't have enough time and enough equipment to be able to do it correctly. You see, that's a description of the church. that the people you see in the church are broken. They are sinful. Each and every one of us are hurting in some way. Each and every one of us have fallen short of what God expects of us. Sometimes it's hard to see because we're so used to ourselves. We see ourselves as the good guys, and we really are. But sometimes the good guys mess up. Sometimes the good guys, so well-intentioned, can actually push people away from God. Sometimes our light is just too bright, and instead of being something to illumine the pathway, comes across as a strobe light, just flashing, driving people crazy, getting in their eyes so they have to look away instead of looking into what it is that we truly want to point them to. That sometimes we are our own worst enemy. You see, I get to tell them, though, that just as in an ER, well, one of the hardest things that we have to do is have a doctor tell us exactly what's wrong with us. You see, that's called the diagnosis. That a doctor will come in and run some tests or look at you and do some things, and they will then tell you what is wrong. And then we have some choices to make. I know of people who have gone to the hospital. They have found out that they have 4 of their arteries into the heart that have occlusions of 70% or greater. And they leave the hospital, and they go home, and their family says, well, how are you? What's wrong? And their answer is, nothing, I'm fine. See, sometimes that happens to us in the church as well. We kind of pretend. We like to say everything's good, when it's not. You see, God is the one who's doing the diagnostic on us. And He is there telling us that we are sinful, that we indeed have done wrong. And we can go about things saying, not me. Couldn't be me. I know Jesus, I'm fine. Would you really do that with your doctor? If a doctor tells you you need a heart transplant, are you just going to say, I'll be okay? If he's going to take the time to do the test and do the diagnostic, would you want to trust in him? Yes, you can get a second opinion, of course, but would you not say, doctor, what then can we do? And if the doctor says, we need a new heart, do we not then allow that to happen? You see, Jesus comes into our lives and He tells us, you are sinful, you are broken, you are sick. But I'm not going to leave you hanging there. I'm going to give you a heart transplant. It is what God calls grace. The love that we do not deserve, the mercy that we do not deserve. And God gives us that. And because of what God gives us, well, then our hearts are changed. Our lives have changed. And we are able then to go out and do all that God asks us to do. It doesn't make us perfect, but we receive healing. We receive restoration. We are made whole again with God. And because of that, we are able then to share that experience with others. We can tell them, yes, we have been broken. Yes, we are sinful. But the mercy of God has saved us and continues to save us. And He can save you as well. Do not look at a church and expect it to be perfect, because it never will be. But know that all who are sick, all who are hurting, all who are broken, they will find healing. You will not find perfection, not in me or anybody else who walks through this building. But you will find God. You will find and hear the Word of God. You will know that God is here, and that God is here because He loves you and because He wants to make you whole again. God is here in this place to tell you that you have not strayed too far. You have not ever done too wrong. That you have not slandered or done anything against Him that is so bad that you cannot be forgiven. You see, He wants to give you that new heart. And then He wants you to feel that heart being clean. And then He wants you to take that healthy heart and body out into the world. It's scary to do. But if we remember that the one who gives us the new heart, the one who makes us whole, promises also that He will go with us wherever we are, then we need not fear. And the light that we take is the light of love, the light of grace, the light of mercy. And that light will illumine the way to God. It is not overbearing. It is not boastful. It is not envious. It is not hateful. Rather, it is love. That is what we are called to be in this world. That is what this church is all about. That is what each and every one of us are called to be and do in this world. That you are the light and the salt that God has made you. And that each and every one of us has special abilities and special degrees of light and salt within us. But they are there. And they are meant to be shared wherever we are at. Not just in this place on Sunday, but everywhere that God will have us be in this world. And remember this. Wherever you go, God goes with you. And whatever you do, God still loves you. God still forgives you. And most importantly, that God has blessed you in everything. And all He would ask is that we might be a blessing to those that we meet. That is the church on earth. That is to be a disciple of Christ. I invite you to come, to sit, to hear and experience His love and His grace, and then to go and share it with all you meet.